Let's take a couple of minutes and we're going to walk through the initial setup and system setup on your new Pioneer in-dash receiver. Even though your particular in-dash receiver may be a 1-DIN model or a 2-DIN model, and may or may not have a CD slot across the top like this one, the button operation in this demonstration is identical for the following Pioneer models: MVH-S4000BT, MVH-S4000BT, FH-S500BT, DEH-S4000BT, DEH-S4010BT. So right now I have the AM/FM radio source on. It could be any source, it doesn't matter. The first thing I want to do is switch the in-dash receiver off. So I want power to the vehicle, but the receiver switched off. So I'm going to press and hold the source button for a couple of seconds. That will switch the in-dash receiver off. Now you might also have the clock on your display right here. That's fine too. For right now I'm going to switch the clock off, but you could have it on. Once the receiver is switched off, but the vehicle is still powered up, I'm going to press in on the volume control. And when I press in on volume, I get two menus here. First is System menu, and then we also have the Initial menu. I want to start off with the Initial menu, and we'll press Enter here to get into the Initial menu. The first thing we see is the speaker and pre-out mode. So this system is set up to operate 4 speakers, 2 front, 2 rear, and it has 2 sets of RCA outputs, front and rear or front and subwoofer outputs. Now the settings here that we make will change how the audio is output from both the speakers and from the RCA outputs. So let's take a look at this. We'll press Enter to go into the setup here. This says that my rear speaker outputs are set to full range output and my rear RCA outputs are set to subwoofer output. So rear speakers full range, rear RCA is subwoofer output. Now if I roll over here to the next setting, this says the rear speaker outputs are subwoofer output, and if you wanted to, you could operate a small subwoofer on the rear speaker outputs from the system, and the rear RCA is also set to subwoofer output. And if I roll over one more time here, this says that both the rear speaker outputs and the rear RCA outputs are set to full range output. So rear and rear is full range output for both the speakers and the RCA outputs. Now if you have this setting here, you will not have any subwoofer controls built into the in-dash receiver. If you want subwoofer controls built into the in-dash receiver, you need to have the subwoofer output at least on the RCA output part of the system. So I'm going to leave it here for right now, which is rear speaker outputs are set up as full range and rear RCA outputs are set up as subwoofer output. When I'm done making my adjustments there, I'll go back and we'll roll over to the next setting, which is our system update. And if we press in on the volume control with system update, we can do the software update here, and we'll press Enter again. And that will show me a file error because we would do the software update through a USB that we've downloaded from pioneerelectronics.com with a firmware update for the system. We will put it in through USB. We'll go back and we'll roll over to the next setting, which is our system information, and we'll press Enter here. And this gives me the version number of the software that is on the in-dash receiver right now. When you go to pioneerelectronics.com to see if there's a new version available, check to see the version that's installed on your in-dash receiver right now. And we'll go back, and we'll go back one more. And that will roll over to system reset. If you want to do a full reset on the system and make it effectively as when you took it out of the box, you can press in on the volume control here and confirm yes to do a full system reset. We're not going to do that right now. I'm going to go back. Now let's roll over to the next setting, which is back around to our speaker and pre-out mode. So that's the whole initial setup. We'll go back now, and from initial, we will go over to the system menu. And we'll press Enter here. Now remember, the system, the in-dash receiver is switched off right now. The first thing is the language that we can choose, and we have our choice between English, Spanish, and French. For right now, I'm going to choose English language, and we'll roll over to the next setting, which is setting the clock. And we can set the clock here and change the display of the clock between 12 and 24 hours. For more information on that, be sure to check out the full clock setting video. And we will roll over to the next setting, which is the beep tone. You can hear a beep tone in the system when you press different buttons. If you don't want to hear that beep tone, you can choose to switch it on or off right here. For right now, I'm going to leave the beep tone switched off. Let's roll over to the next setting, which is our information display. Now, the info display is the SYS that you see up here, along with the larger display. And there's a number of different things that can be displayed here. It depends on what you choose to display here and what source is playing. So we'll press in on the volume control, and you can choose to have the source displayed up here, or you can have a spectrum analyzer displayed up there. Or you can choose to switch this off so there's nothing displayed up there to make it a simpler display on screen. And there's a number of other options here. Source and spectrum analyzer, clock and spectrum analyzer, source and live effects, or lights that will operate and react to the beat of the music. And we have clock and live effects, and back around to the source. So choose what you like best here, and again, you will see different things operating when different sources are chosen in the system. Now we'll go back and roll over to the next setting, which is auxiliary input. Here's the auxiliary input, and if you use the auxiliary input regularly, you're going to want to have AUX on. If you don't use the auxiliary input, you might want to switch it off, and then auxiliary will not show up in your source list when you press the source button. So if you're pressing the source button looking for auxiliary, check the system settings and make sure that auxiliary input is switched on. Let's roll over to the next setting here. Bluetooth audio. This is exactly the same thing as source. As the auxiliary. If you use Bluetooth audio on a regular basis, you want to make sure that it's switched on. If you don't use Bluetooth audio, you can switch it off, and then it won't show up in your source list. I use Bluetooth audio all the time, so I want Bluetooth audio on so it shows up in my source list. We'll roll over to the next setting, which is Spotify. And the system has a full Spotify interface for both your iPhone and your Android phone. If you use Spotify, you're going to want to have the Spotify source switched on. If you don't, you can switch the Spotify source off. For right now, I'm going to leave that switched on. Let's roll over to the next setting, which is our Bluetooth memory clear. So if you've had a number of different devices connected to the system through Bluetooth, and you just want to dump them all out of there, you can do that right here just by clearing the memory. We're going to go back and roll over to the next setting, which is our phone connection type, and we'll press enter here to get into this. If I typically connect an Android phone, you're going to want Android selected here. If you typically choose an iPhone, you're going to want an iPhone connected here, and if you use some other type of device, you're going to want others. Most people will use either an Android phone or an iPhone, so you're going to choose one of those, and based on that, other settings will change in this system menu. So let's go back and roll over to the next setting, which is to automatically prompt the app when you start. This means when we're using Pioneer's ARC app and we plug it in through USB, when we plug it in through USB, it will automatically start the ARC app on the phone and connect to the in-dash receiver. And if that doesn't work that way, you can always press and hold the volume control to fire up the ARC app on your phone. Let's roll over to the next setting, which is USB auto on. Of course, we have the USB port over here. When you plug in a USB thumb drive, the system can automatically go to the USB source and begin to play a track from the thumb drive. But if you plug in your phone and you just want to charge your phone, maybe you don't want it to switch to the USB source. Now, if that's the case, you can switch USB auto off, and this means you can plug in your phone and it will charge your phone, but it won't automatically switch to the USB source. You can always press the source button here to switch to the USB source, but it won't automatically happen if you don't want it to. I like it to switch to the USB source automatically, so I'm going to switch USB auto on. Let's roll over to the next setting, which is back around to our language settings. When you're done making your adjustments here, you can just press the band button to go back and press the source to fire up the system.